Welcome to this week's video to warm up to the module on learning theories, which provides an appropriate mid-semester checkpoint for us. This week we're making the transition to the Merriam and Bierma text and engaging with their chapter on learning theories. One of the challenges in teaching any topic is whether to begin with the theory and then show examples, or to start with examples and then show the theory. Merriam and Bierma, using the first approach in writing their text, start by discussing selected learning theories in an early chapter and then build on them later. However, we're actually halfway through this course. So the approach I chose was to use the concrete examples and teaching strategies from the Ambrose text first, and then see if we can relate them to the theories. Experts generally like to work from theory to example. However, many novices to the field get bogged down in the opacity and abstractness of theory and benefit from considering examples first. In the reality of any scientific field, theories evolve to explain phenomena, so there's a logical basis for examining phenomena before examining the explanatory theories. You'll also discover as you read that there is no agreed upon list of learning theories, and dozens of concepts regarding learning have been labeled as theories. Your text authors have chosen just 5 of these concepts that they view as traditional and well-founded. I have added the qualifier general in the module title because it is important to understand that these theories apply to humans generally, and one of them, behaviorism, arguably applies to all animals. In other words, these theories are not unique or peculiar to adult learning. In a couple of weeks, we'll explore where there really is such a thing as a theory of learning that is really unique to adults. We have 3 objectives this week. One is the ability to compare and contrast the learning theories that you read about in the text in terms of how the authors of those theories view the process of learning that's happening and the necessary conditions for that learning to happen. Want to connect your building understanding of these learning theories to your own learning experiences. How can you see these theories expressed in your own learning? And thinking forward to your final assignment in this course, where you'll be using your knowledge of adult learning to develop a philosophy of teaching, to think about how your philosophy will be grounded in these learning theories. Sometimes practitioners in the field feel that theory is of no use, and that theory confuses practice, although that probably isn't what Yogi Berra was trying to convey in this quote. The cartoon shows, however, that one cannot really learn a field with a high level of competence or expertise. They are unable to interweave their practice with the explanatory power of theory. The theory is an explanation for an observed phenomenon, a reality. And just as important, a theory makes predictions about phenomena that may not have yet been observed with the theory in mind. Therefore, further observations confirm the theory if it is valid. If new observations fail to match with theory, the theory requires modification, or it needs to be discarded because it will fail to meet the expectation of explanatory power. Theories are sometimes discarded arbitrarily when they don't fit with our preconceived notions, hence the commonly heard statement, "It's just a theory." But real theories within the natural and social sciences exist because of their explanatory power and should not be dismissed lightly. This jumping lamb is not defying Einstein's theory of general relativity. Likewise, stating a theory is not a trivial matter. When we hear somebody say, "I have a theory," they probably mean that they have a hypothesis, a testable idea about what is going on. It's worth pointing out that theory means something different to practitioners of the natural sciences. This would include fields like physics, chemistry, biology, geology, and astronomy, than for workers in the social sciences, which include disciplines such as sociology, psychology, anthropology, linguistics, and education. I certainly have had to wrestle with this conflict since I was trained in the natural sciences and have increasingly pursued scholarship in the social sciences. Natural scientists define theory to mean a concept that does such a good job of explaining how the natural world works that it is accepted as the single best explanation, unless and until scientific data and testable hypotheses show that the theory is erroneous and requires replacement with a better explanation. But in the social sciences, the complex interactions of people with one another and with their environment are not governed by overarching natural laws. And as a result, different theories commonly emerge to describe a phenomenon depending on its particular context and the nature of the population being observed. The study of learning is a mixture of natural and social sciences. The natural science component comes from understanding that learning fundamentally is controlled by neurobiological processes in the brain, and we'll look at these a little bit next week. However, the existing learning theories are rooted entirely in social science, which explains why we don't have just a single theory of learning to think about. If you've previously completed psychology courses or participated as a student recruit in a psychology experiment, then you might think that cognitive psychologists like natural scientists would have been able to isolate the learning variables through controlled experiments. And indeed, the cognitive psychology research is an important archive of very essential information for understanding learning. However, in the effort to isolate variables, the conditions for most psychology experiments are not very realistic, which tends to raise skepticism about their applicability to authentic learning environments. Learning science, which is a core area of the OILS program, is different in that researchers work in authentic learning environments with a focus on developing process theory that explains why instructional practices do or do not work. However, another challenge in all learning research is that researchers are usually attempting to isolate general rules and theories by generalizing over and in some cases purposely ignoring differences between individual learners. And this is causing increasing tension with sociological aspects of the educational endeavor because those researchers that argue for adjusting instruction to accommodate the needs of increasingly diverse learners. In a general way, you'll see as you read this week that the learning theories differ from one another primarily in two ways. Each one starts with the premise of what happens when learning takes place. If two researchers differ in their view of the learning phenomenon, it is reasonable, therefore, that they would differ in the theory that they would offer to explain that phenomenon. In the absence of a general law of learning, or even a single accepted definition of learning, it is easy to see why there might be an almost limitless number of learning theories. Another important distinction between some of the theories is whether learning is thought to be possible in the absence of other people. But most importantly, keep in mind as you pursue this week's topic that you will likely find things of value from each of the learning theories. Your beliefs about learning and teaching likely show preferences to one or two of the theories, but probably not exclusively to just one of them. For instance, if you accept that learning is a change in behavior, then you would favor the behaviorism theory of learning, which says that a reward stimulus will generate a learned response. Learning that is based on repetition and drilling until behavior is solidified in memory is an example of behaviorism. It can certainly be argued that the rewarding of work with grades is an application of behaviorist theory. Behaviorism is also the only learning theory that applies to other animals and not just humans. For example, the famous experiments by Pavlov with dogs. If you view learning as an information processing pathway in the brain that involves inputs, throughputs, and outputs to build memory, then you would identify as a cognitivist. If you see learning as a developmental pathway that a person takes based on their needs and is largely self-directed, then you would subscribe to humanism. Another approach to learning is to describe it as the knowledge that the learner creates. This is the basis for constructivism. If you believe that learning is social, then you might be a social constructivist, where knowledge is being co-created with other learners, or support the theory of social cognitivism, where there's a strong reliance on learning from the observations of others who model the use of learning approaches, skills, etc. The table at the end of the chapter in Merriam and Bierma endeavors to separate the characteristics of each theory. This table will be a key resource for you to self-assess your learning from the reading and to refer to as you consider your 4R this week and other writing later in the semester. So as you're doing your reading, both in the text and in support of your research for your 4R essay this week, there are a couple of things I hope you'll keep in mind. I'd like for you to be able to think about how you can relate your past learning experiences to these various learning theories, as well as the experience you're having in this course, to think about how it's related to underlying learning theories. You're also working on developing a philosophy of teaching for your putting it together exercise later in the semester. And I'd like you to be thinking about how your existing or evolving philosophy of teaching is related to the learning theories that you're reading about this week, and whether you feel you have a dominant theoretical basis for your teaching. Lastly, in terms of things to be thinking about, I want to point out there is another required video for you to watch this week, a short one that goes into a concept of how understanding the processes and components of learning need to be explained by learning theory, ideas developed by a European researcher, Knut Illeris. And I would like for you to be thinking about how you connect the elements of the learning theories to Illeris's model. Adios.